For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the morning of June 12, 2003, 34-year-old Dr. Quinn Edwards and his research assistant Victoria Campbell, 26, departed from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas for what should have been a routine geological survey in the Mojave Desert. They never returned. Despite an extensive search operation spanning 3 states, involving helicopter sweeps, ground teams, and thermal imaging technology, the 2 researchers seemed to vanish into the vast desert landscape. Their research vehicle was found abandoned, equipment untouched, with no signs of struggle. For 19 years, their families lived with haunting questions about what happened in that remote stretch of desert near the California-Nevada border. Then, in the summer of 2022, a devastating flash flood carved through the desert floor, unearthing secrets that had remained buried for nearly 2 decades. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. In the unforgiving expanse of the Mojave Desert, where the Nevada sun beats down on ancient rock formations and time seems to stand still, 2 promising scientists embarked on what should have been a routine geological survey in the summer of 2003. Dr. Quinn Edwards, a brilliant 34-year-old geologist from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and his research assistant Victoria Campbell, an ambitious 26-year-old graduate student, set out to study mineral formations that had captivated the scientific community's attention. The morning of July 15, 2003, began like any other day in the desert. Edwards and Campbell loaded their white Ford Explorer research vehicle with sophisticated geological equipment, emergency supplies, and enough water to last several days. Their colleagues at UNLV recalled their excitement about the expedition, particularly Campbell's enthusiasm about the potential findings that could form the cornerstone of her graduate thesis. At 8:47 a.m., Edwards made his final call to the geology department, confirming their arrival at the designated research site approximately 60 miles northwest of Las Vegas. Campbell sent a text message to her sister at 2:13 p.m., describing unusual mineral formations they had discovered. It would be the last time anyone heard from either of them. 3 days later, when the researchers failed to return to campus and missed their scheduled check-in, university officials raised the alarm. Park rangers located their abandoned research vehicle on July 19, finding it exactly where Edwards had indicated they would be working. The scene was puzzling from the start. Their valuable equipment remained untouched inside the locked vehicle, including their satellite phones and laptops. Their water supplies were barely touched, and their emergency beacons lay unused in their protective cases. The initial search revealed no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away from the site, and no indication of where the 2 researchers might have gone. The desert, vast and secretive, had seemingly swallowed them whole. Search and rescue teams combed the area for weeks, utilizing helicopters equipped with thermal imaging technology, ground teams with tracking dogs, and experienced desert guides familiar with the terrain. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered that both Edwards and Campbell were experienced field researchers who had conducted numerous similar surveys in harsh conditions. Edwards had spent over a decade studying desert geological formations, and Campbell had completed advanced wilderness survival training. Their disappearance without activating any of their emergency equipment defied logical explanation. As summer turned to fall, the search area expanded to cover over 300 square miles of desert terrain. Family members maintained a constant vigil at the command center, while fellow scientists from UNLV volunteered their time to analyze geological data that might provide clues to their colleagues' intended research locations. The absence of any distress signal proved particularly baffling to investigators. The research vehicle contained 3 separate emergency beacons, each designed to work in different conditions. All were found in perfect working order, their batteries full, their signals never activated. It was as if Edwards and Campbell had simply stepped out of their vehicle and vanished into thin air. Weather records from that day showed clear conditions with temperatures reaching 102 degrees Fahrenheit hot, but not unusual for the region. No sudden storms had been recorded, no seismic activity reported, and no other unusual natural phenomena that might explain their disappearance. As the first month drew to a close, the investigation had generated more questions than answers. Why would 2 experienced researchers abandon their vehicle and equipment? How could they disappear without leaving any traces in the desert soil? And perhaps most perplexing, why hadn't they used any of their emergency equipment if they found themselves in trouble? The disappearance of Edwards and Campbell sent shockwaves through the scientific community, leading to immediate changes in research protocols at UNLV and other institutions conducting desert field studies. Their absence left an unfillable void in both their academic department and their families' lives, marking the beginning of a mystery that would haunt the Nevada desert for nearly 2 decades. The initial investigation into the Edwards-Campbell disappearance fell under the jurisdiction of Nevada State Police Captain Jennifer Wilson, a veteran officer with 15 years of experience in desert search operations. Within hours of the missing persons report, Wilson established a command center at the site where the research vehicle had been discovered, coordinating efforts between multiple agencies. The Ford Explorer yielded few immediate clues. Forensics teams meticulously documented the vehicle's contents, finding everything in remarkably ordinary condition. The researchers' field notebooks contained detailed observations from their morning work, ending abruptly at what appeared to be mid-sentence. Their laptops, when analyzed, showed no signs of deleted files or suspicious communications. The last document Edwards had been working on was a standard mineral composition analysis. Interviews with UNLV faculty painted a picture of 2 dedicated scientists with no personal conflicts or concerning behavior. Dr. Marcus Thompson, head of the geology department, described Edwards as methodical and safety-conscious. Quinn was the type of researcher who triple-checked everything, Thompson explained during his interview. He'd never take unnecessary risks in the field. Victoria Campbell's academic advisor, Dr. Sarah Chen, provided insights into the graduate student's state of mind before the expedition. Campbell had been excited about preliminary findings from their previous survey, believing they were close to documenting a unique mineral formation. Her research notes, recovered from her campus office, showed no indication of anxiety or distress about the upcoming fieldwork. The search itself proved challenging from the start. Helicopter surveys covered increasingly wider circles from the vehicle's location, while ground teams battled temperatures soaring past 100 degrees. The terrain, characterized by deep ravines and rocky outcrops, created numerous blind spots that had to be checked individually. Search dogs struggled in the heat, their handlers forced to work in short shifts to prevent exhaustion. Local mining operations within a 50-mile radius were contacted and interviewed. Most offered full cooperation, providing access to their sites and employee records. Several mining crews even suspended their operations to assist in the search, though their efforts yielded no results. The case attracted national media attention, with major networks broadcasting nightly updates from the command center. The coverage brought both help and hindrance. While it kept public interest alive, it also attracted numerous psychics and amateur sleuths whose false leads drained valuable resources from the investigation. As days turned into weeks, Captain Wilson faced mounting pressure to explain the inexplicable. The vehicle's location had been thoroughly documented. It sat on a flat, open stretch of desert with clear visibility in all directions. Yet no tire tracks apart from the researchers' own vehicle were found in the vicinity, no footprints led away from the site. The surrounding soil, typically prone to preserving impressions, offered no clues about their direction of travel. The families remained stationed at a nearby motel, their hopes rising and falling with each day's search reports. Edward's wife, Maria, provided investigators with his detailed research proposals and maps, while Campbell's parents shared their daughter's correspondence about the project. Every document was scrutinized for hints about locations they might have planned to explore. Weather data for the region was analyzed extensively. Satellite imagery from the day of their disappearance showed no unusual atmospheric conditions, no dust storms, no sudden weather events that might have disoriented the researchers. The clear conditions only deepened the mystery. How could two people vanish without a trace on such a clear day, in terrain with high visibility? As the first month of investigation drew to a close, Captain Wilson faced the difficult task of scaling back the active search. Despite employing every available resource, from infrared cameras to ground-penetrating radar, the desert had refused to yield its secrets. The case would remain active, but the massive search operation had to be reduced to targeted sweeps based on new information. The investigation's initial phase concluded with a somber press conference where Wilson promised the families that the case would never be closed until answers were found. As the command center was dismantled, the only certainty was that somewhere in the vast Mojave Desert, two scientists and their story lay hidden, waiting to be discovered. As summer faded into autumn, and autumn gave way to winter, the disappearance of Dr. Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell settled into the haunting rhythm of a cold case. The once bustling command center stood empty, its whiteboards wiped clean of search coordinates and timelines. Only a small team, led by Detective James Morrison of the Nevada State Police Cold Case Unit, continued to sift through the evidence that had puzzled investigators for months. The first anniversary of their disappearance brought renewed media attention, but no fresh leads. The annual review process became a painful ritual for both families, who gathered each July to hear updates that increasingly contained no new information. Maria Edwards maintained her husband's office at UNLV exactly as he had left it, his coffee mug still sitting on a stack of geological surveys, while the Campbell family established a scholarship in Victoria's name for aspiring female geologists. Attempts to trace cell phone signals had proven futile early in the investigation. Despite advanced technology, the last ping from Victoria's phone remained stubbornly fixed at 2:13 p.m. on that July afternoon, corresponding with her final text message. Quinn's phone had never registered another signal after his morning call to the department. The cell tower data, analyzed repeatedly over the years, revealed nothing about their movements after these final communications. Local mining operations, initially cooperative, gradually reduced their engagement with investigators. Annual interviews became perfunctory, with company representatives providing the same responses year after year. The desert itself seemed to conspire against the investigation, as seasonal winds and flash floods slowly erased whatever physical evidence might have remained undiscovered. Detective Morrison's team explored every possible angle, no matter how unlikely. They investigated similar disappearances in other desert regions, examined satellite imagery for signs of disturbed Earth, and interviewed retired prospectors who knew the area's hidden caves and abandoned mines. Each potential lead eventually joined the growing file of dead ends. The university community struggled to move forward. The geology department's field research protocols underwent extensive revision, requiring all teams to carry multiple tracking devices and maintain hourly radio contact. Yet the changes felt hollow, mere bureaucratic responses to a mystery that defied explanation. Graduate students spoke in hushed tones about the Edwards-Campbell disappearance, their stories growing more elaborate with each passing year. 5 years into the investigation, the case file had grown to fill 3 thick binders, yet contained more speculation than fact. The annual review process became increasingly frustrating for Captain Jennifer Wilson, who had since been promoted, but continued to monitor the case. Each year, she faced the families with the same painful admission. Despite every effort, they were no closer to understanding what had happened in the desert that day. The family's hope never completely died, but it changed shape over the years. Maria Edwards channeled her grief into establishing a desert safety training program for research scientists. The Campbells became advocates for improved emergency beacon systems in remote research locations. Their activism kept the case in the public consciousness, even as active investigation dwindled to occasional database searches and routine checks of unidentified remains. A decade passed, and the desert kept its secret. The missing persons posters, once prominently displayed throughout Nevada, faded and were replaced by newer cases. The original investigators retired or moved on to other departments. Only Detective Morrison, approaching retirement himself, maintained regular contact with the families, unwilling to let the case slip completely into obscurity. The disappearance became a cautionary tale in academic circles, a reminder of the desert's dangerous unpredictability. Yet those who knew Quinn and Victoria refused to accept that two experienced researchers could simply vanish without explanation. Their colleagues at UNLV maintained a small memorial display in the geology department, featuring their research papers and photographs from happier times. As the years continued to pass, the case file gathered dust in the cold case unit's archives, its mysteries seemingly destined to remain unsolved. The desert, vast and inscrutable, continued its slow dance of wind and sand, guarding whatever evidence might still lie hidden beneath its surface. For those who remembered Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell, the Mojave became more than just a desert. It became a silent witness to an enduring mystery that seemed destined to remain forever unsolved. That is, until the summer of 2022, when nature itself would finally begin to reveal the truth that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. The summer of 2022 brought unprecedented rainfall to the Mojave Desert, transforming the typically arid landscape into a maze of flash floods and shifting earth. On August 12, as water carved new channels through the ancient terrain, the desert finally surrendered its long-held secret. A park ranger, conducting a post-flood damage assessment, spotted something unusual protruding from a newly exposed ravine wall, the unmistakable shape of human remains. Within hours, the remote site transformed into a hub of activity. Bureau of Land Management Agent Sarah Rodriguez arrived first, immediately recognizing the significance of what the floods had uncovered. Alongside the skeletal remains lay fragments of weathered clothing and a partially preserved leather wallet. Inside, a sodden but legible University of Nevada, Las Vegas faculty ID card bore the name and face of Dr. Quinn Edwards. The discovery site lay nearly 2 miles from where the research vehicle had been found 19 years earlier. As forensics teams carefully excavated the area, they uncovered a second set of remains, later confirmed through dental records to be Victoria Campbell. But it was what lay beneath their bodies that transformed a missing persons case into something far more sinister. Buried deeper in the soil, investigators found extensive evidence of an unauthorized mining operation. Rusted equipment, industrial-grade drilling components, and most significantly, traces of uranium ore scattered throughout the debris. Environmental testing revealed radiation levels far exceeding natural background readings, suggesting years of illegal extraction activities. The excavation expanded as more evidence emerged. Specialist David Chen, brought in from the Environmental Crimes Division, documented a sophisticated operation that had been carefully concealed beneath a thin layer of desert soil. The site contained evidence of a processing facility, hastily dismantled and buried, along with documents that had somehow survived the years underground, protected by sealed plastic containers. Among these preserved papers, investigators found Quinn Edwards' final research notes, written in his distinctive hand. The pages detailed his and Victoria's growing concern about unusual mineral readings they had detected during their survey. Their final entries described plans to report their findings to federal authorities, having realized they had stumbled upon an illegal mining operation. The discovery shocked the local mining community. The operation's location, less than a mile from an active fault line, represented an environmental catastrophe waiting to happen. Subsequent testing revealed a plume of contaminated groundwater extending several miles from the site, its movement accelerated by the recent flooding. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with the FBI to trace the operation's history through mining equipment serial numbers and partial documentation found at the site. The trail led to Marcus Webb, a former mining foreman who had operated legitimate sites throughout Nevada in the early 2000s. Webb, now 71 and living in retirement in Arizona, had maintained his innocence in the disappearance for nearly 2 decades. The evidence painted a grim picture of what had happened that July day in 2003. Edwards and Campbell had apparently encountered Webb's illegal operation during their survey, their scientific equipment detecting the radioactive signature of his uranium extraction. The confrontation that followed left no witnesses until the desert itself began to speak. As summer stretched into fall, the excavation continued, revealing the full scope of Webb's operation. The site had been carefully chosen to avoid detection, hidden in a natural depression that shielded it from aerial observation. The recent floods had not only exposed the bodies, but had also unearthed evidence of systematic environmental violations spanning more than 20 years. For the families of Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell, the discovery brought a bitter mixture of closure and renewed grief. The truth of their loved one's fate had literally risen from the desert floor, carried by the same forces of nature they had devoted their careers to studying. Their final acts had been in defense of the environment they had dedicated their lives to understanding, their deaths a testament to the dangerous secrets that lay hidden beneath the Mojave's surface. The desert had kept its secret for 19 years, but in the end, nature itself had become the key witness in solving one of Nevada's most puzzling disappearances. The silence of the Mojave had finally been broken, revealing a truth more disturbing than anyone had imagined during those long years of searching. The discovery of Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell's remains transformed a decades-old missing persons case into a complex environmental investigation that drew expertise from multiple federal agencies. Agent Sarah Rodriguez of the Bureau of Land Management took lead position in the newly formed task force, working closely with environmental crimes specialist David Chen to unravel the extent of the illegal mining operation. Chen's initial analysis of soil samples from the burial site revealed uranium contamination at levels nearly 40 times higher than naturally occurring deposits in the region. The radiation signatures formed a distinct pattern that suggested systematic extraction over many years, with the highest concentration centered around what appeared to be a hastily dismantled processing facility. The task force meticulously mapped the site, using ground-penetrating radar to reveal a network of shallow tunnels and processing areas that had been carefully concealed beneath the desert floor. The operation's sophistication pointed to significant financial investment and technical expertise, well beyond the capabilities of a small-scale illegal prospecting venture. David Chen's investigation revealed how the operation had managed to avoid detection for so long. The site had been chosen with remarkable precision, situated in a natural depression that shielded it from aerial surveillance. The surrounding rock formations created a unique wind pattern that dispersed any dust from the mining activities, while the remote location deterred casual observers. Financial investigators began tracing uranium sales through international markets, uncovering a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. The paper trail led them to Marcus Webb, whose legitimate mining operations had served as a perfect cover for his illegal activities. Webb had leveraged his industry connections and knowledge of regulatory oversight to operate undetected for years. The scope of environmental damage proved staggering. Contaminated groundwater had spread through underground aquifers, threatening water sources miles from the original site. Chemical analysis of preserved soil layers showed a progressive increase in toxic metals and radioactive isotopes, creating a timeline of destruction that aligned perfectly with Webb's management of various mining operations in the region. As evidence mounted, investigators pieced together the events that led to Edwards and Campbell's deaths. Their geological survey had inadvertently detected radiation anomalies that pointed to the illegal mining operation. Webb's personal records, recovered from his home in Arizona, included notations about university interference, dated just days before the researchers disappeared. The task force's findings painted a picture of systematic environmental destruction motivated by profit. Webb had exploited his position as a respected mining foreman to establish and maintain an illegal uranium extraction facility on federal land. The operation had generated millions in unreported income while causing environmental damage that would take generations to remediate. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with numerous agencies to document the full impact of Webb's activities. Environmental Protection Agency specialists mapped contamination zones, while geological surveys assessed structural damage to the surrounding rock formations. Each new discovery added to the weight of evidence against Webb and revealed the true cost of his two-decade deception. The investigation expanded beyond the immediate crime scene to examine other sites where Webb had operated. Pattern analysis suggested similar small-scale operations might have existed elsewhere in the region, leading to widespread testing of soil samples from abandoned mining claims. The results would eventually lead to a comprehensive review of mining oversight procedures across multiple states. As summer turned to fall, the task force compiled their findings into what would become a landmark environmental crimes case. The evidence they gathered revealed not just a double homicide, but a calculated scheme that had prioritized profit over human life and environmental safety. Webb's operation had remained hidden for nearly 20 years, but its discovery would ultimately change how mining activities in the American Southwest were monitored and regulated. The new investigation had started with 2 bodies revealed by flash flooding, but had uncovered something far more insidious, a criminal enterprise that had exploited the vast solitude of the Mojave Desert to conceal its activities. For the investigators, each new piece of evidence reinforced the importance of their work in bringing justice not only for Edwards and Campbell, but for the environment they had died trying to protect. The breakthrough in the Edwards-Campbell case came suddenly, delivered in a weathered metal box that had protected its contents from 19 years of desert burial. Among the items recovered from the flood-exposed site, Quinn Edwards' field notebook proved the most damning piece of evidence. Its pages preserved by a watertight research container designed to protect sensitive equipment from harsh conditions. The notebook's final entries, written in Edwards' precise handwriting, documented more than geological observations. His last notes, dated July 15, 2003, detailed the discovery of unusual radiation readings that didn't match any known natural formations in the area. Edwards had meticulously recorded coordinates, radiation levels, and most crucially, a hand-drawn map showing the location of what he suspected was an unauthorized mining operation. Victoria Campbell's contribution appeared in the margins, her distinctive notations highlighting environmental concerns and references to federal regulations regarding uranium extraction. The two researchers had clearly recognized the significance of their discovery, with Campbell noting specific violations of the Clean Water Act and federal mining statutes. The final entry ended mid-sentence. Meeting with site operator to discuss unauthorized activity. Subject identifies himself as M. Webb, claims legitimate mining rights but unable to produce proper documentation. Proceeding to contact BLM office regarding. When confronted with Edwards' preserved notes and the overwhelming physical evidence, Marcus Webb's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. In a recorded confession at the Phoenix FBI field office, Webb described how he had intercepted the researchers before they could report their findings. The confrontation had turned violent when Edwards and Campbell refused his attempts at bribery, insisting they would notify federal authorities. Webb's confession revealed the cold calculation behind his actions. He had been operating the illegal uranium extraction facility for years, generating millions in unreported income. The researchers' discovery threatened not just his operation, but his entire carefully constructed life. In his own words, "They were going to ruin everything I'd built. I couldn't let that happen." The details of that July afternoon emerged with chilling clarity. Webb described how he had followed the researchers from their vehicle, confronting them as they documented the illegal operation. When threats and offers of money failed, he had used a mining tool to strike Edwards from behind. Campbell had tried to run but stumbled in the loose desert soil. Webb buried their bodies near the processing facility, later relocating his operation to another site and carefully concealing all evidence of its existence. The recovery of Edwards' notebook provided investigators with exact coordinates of Webb's original mining operation, allowing them to map the full extent of environmental damage. His detailed observations, combined with Campbell's regulatory citations, formed the foundation of both the murder prosecution and subsequent environmental crimes cases. Webb's confession marked the end of nearly 2 decades of deception. At 71, he showed little remorse for the murders, focusing instead on justifying his mining operation as a necessary circumvention of government oversight. His attempts to minimize his actions fell flat against the weight of evidence preserved in Edwards' notebook. The breakthrough brought both resolution and renewed grief. Maria Edwards, upon reading her husband's final notes, recognized the same precise attention to detail that had characterized his academic work. The Campbell family found some comfort in knowing their daughter had stood firm in defense of environmental regulations, even in the face of threats. For the investigators who had pursued the case for years, Edwards' notebook provided the final pieces of a puzzle that had haunted their careers. The preserved pages spoke across time, giving voice to 2 scientists who had died trying to protect the desert they studied. Their detailed documentation, intended for academic research, instead became their final testimony against the man who had silenced them. Webb's confession and the evidence from Edwards' notebook led to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The court cited the calculated nature of the murders and the extensive environmental damage as justification for the maximum penalty. The man who had hidden his crimes beneath the desert soil for nearly 20 years would spend his remaining days in prison, while the desert slowly healed from the wounds his greed had inflicted. The resolution of the Edwards-Campbell case brought sweeping changes to both the scientific and mining communities across the American Southwest. Marcus Webb's conviction in late 2022 marked more than just the end of a 19-year mystery. It sparked a fundamental transformation in how geological research and mining operations were conducted in desert regions. Webb's sentencing hearing drew national attention as prosecutors detailed the calculated nature of his crimes. The judge, citing the dual impact of the murders and environmental destruction, handed down consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Webb, stoic throughout the proceedings, offered no apology to the families, maintaining that his actions had been necessary for business. The environmental impact assessment that followed Webb's conviction revealed contamination far more extensive than initially feared. Uranium traces had leached into underground aquifers, creating a toxic plume that threatened water sources across 3 counties. The cleanup effort, estimated to cost over $100 million, would require decades of continuous remediation work. At the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, the geology department established the Edwards Campbell Memorial Research Center, dedicated to advancing safe and ethical geological studies. The center's first initiative focused on developing enhanced safety protocols for field researchers, including real-time tracking systems and automated environmental hazard detection. Maria Edwards channeled her grief into advocacy, working with congressional representatives to draft legislation strengthening penalties for environmental crimes. The Edwards Act, passed in 2023, mandated stricter oversight of mining operations and increased protections for scientific researchers working in remote locations. Victoria Campbell's legacy lived on through a fellowship program established in her name, supporting female graduate students in environmental geology. The first Campbell Fellow, ironically, would focus her research on developing new methods for detecting illegal mining operations using satellite imagery and radiation signatures. The Bureau of Land Management implemented comprehensive reforms in its monitoring of desert regions. Agent Sarah Rodriguez, promoted to lead a new environmental crimes task force, developed protocols for regular radiation surveys of remote areas. Her team's work led to the discovery of 3 other illegal mining operations within the first year. For the families, the resolution brought a complex mixture of relief and renewed mourning. The recovery of Quinn and Victoria's remains allowed for proper burials, ending 19 years of uncertainty. At the memorial service, colleagues shared stories of their dedication to science and environmental protection, values that had ultimately cost them their lives. The case's impact extended beyond the immediate participants. Mining companies throughout the Southwest faced increased scrutiny and regulation. The industry, forced to confront its history of environmental violations, implemented stricter self-monitoring protocols. Several companies voluntarily established funds for environmental restoration projects. David Chen's Environmental Crimes Unit expanded its operations, using lessons learned from the Webb case to develop new investigation techniques. His team's findings led to the creation of a database tracking radiation anomalies across public lands, making it harder for illegal mining operations to remain hidden. The Mojave Desert itself began a slow process of healing. Environmental scientists monitored the contaminated areas, documenting the gradual return of native species to regions where Webb's operations had created dead zones. The process would take generations, but each small sign of recovery represented a victory for the principles Edwards and Campbell had died defending. As the desert winds continued their eternal dance across the landscape, the story of Quinn Edwards and Victoria Campbell became part of the region's folklore. Their deaths had exposed not just a killer, but a system of environmental exploitation that had operated unchecked for too long. Their final contribution to science came not through their intended research, but through the changes their deaths inspired in how humanity interacts with the desert's ancient secrets. The case files were finally closed, but their impact continued to ripple through the scientific and law enforcement communities. In the end, 2 dedicated researchers had given their lives protecting the environment they loved, their sacrifice leading to reforms that would protect future generations of scientists and preserve the delicate desert ecosystem they had worked to understand.